What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and this is Does It Suck, the show where we take a deep dive look at a new game and see what's good and bad about it. This week I actually decided to go and play the Stubbs the Zombie Remaster because this is a game I played back in the day, but I haven't played it since. In fact, it's been about 15 years since I've had a chance to be this rotting zombie menace, and this game has managed to age remarkably well, but this is a very different style of remaster. They haven't done pretty much anything to the graphics themselves. This is better resolution, but for the most part, this is the exact same game that existed back in the day, except with some slightly modernized controls. So I want to try and break this game down as if you've never played it, just kind of examining what makes this game good and why I think that in 2021, it's not exactly the best experience ever. Now let's start things off by talking about the gameplay itself, because this is definitely the best part of it. Now, of course, in this game, we're playing as Stubbs himself, who happens to be a recently awoken undead, but instead of just being a typical shambling corpse, Stubbs has some very unique abilities that kind of make him able to completely take over the city himself. As we get a chance to very brokenly run through the series of levels, we're going to be doing things like trying to eat some brains, making an army of our own undead minions, and even doing things like using gut explosions, setting off grenades, or even trying to mind control soldiers to have them shoot their buddies. Your toolkit as Stubbs is surprisingly diverse, and here's where you really get a chance to appreciate the modernized controls, because while at times the graphics aren't the best and definitely the animations are kind of archaic, I really appreciate the fact that this still feels like a modern indie game. It feels like everything you're trying to do is very, very accessible, from driving cars to setting off explosions. Everything is definitely exactly what I wanted it to be. Now I want to take a second here before we go deeper into how you play this. I want to just say something about the setting, because this is something I feel like makes this game actually age the best. So this takes place in the 1950s in a city called Punch Bowl. Now, Punch Bowl is supposed to be a city of the future. They've got robots and flying cars and cops that talk into gigantic sci-fi looking walkie-talkies and stuff, and this definitely lends a lot of room for the humor. And I have to say that typically jokes age incredibly bad. If you look at some comedy routines from even 10 years ago, they're just so cringe at times. But I feel like because this is making fun of like that futuristic version of the 50s in this simultaneously outdated game, it really, really works. Jokes like a huge robot that actually works at the gas station and basically humps your car to fill up the gas tank, or something like these singing quartet guys that like to constantly sing about how they're going to kill you. It's so silly that this still manages to function so well, but every joke surprisingly lands incredibly well. Now, part of the reason this game got so much attention back in the day is because, yes, it's very fun, but additionally, this is built inside of the Halo engine, so it means that a lot of times the lighting effects, the sparks, the explosions, or even times you're trying to take on people, it all works exceptionally well. You can definitely tell that even though people aren't going back to play Halo anymore, this still has that incredibly tight functionality, and getting a chance to just go around and take over the city one bite at a time, it's impressive that it still just sits together in such a nice ensemble. But I want to actually talk about the bads. The biggest bad about this of all is that this game, it sadly feels as if there's like two separate chunks of this game that have just been very poorly pasted together. And what I mean by that is the opening chapters of this game are incredibly just free-spirited. You get a chance to explore, the environments are very open, everywhere you walk there's people you can eat, there's not a lot of like craziness around. So you get a chance to kind of appreciate this goofy city before we completely burn it to the ground. But the second half of this game, pretty much all the humans we fight have guns, and we're not just talking about pistols and stuff. These people have magical laser rifles, people have things like machine guns or shotguns or even long-range rifles, and it becomes much more difficult. Now, the difficulty itself is not a problem. It's because, honestly, the AI is incredibly bad. I mean, not to make a bad joke, but they're almost brainless. And so typically the way you do this is you just walk up, you wait for them to miss their opening shot, and then you try and bite them. But it definitely makes huge sections of this game felt like hide and seek, and it really kind of slowed down the pace of a game that otherwise felt much, much more swift. One of the things I would do is, in the later half of the game, you get an ability to mind control people specifically. You throw one of your hands, it grips onto their skull, and then you're able to do stuff through their eyes, including shoot their guns. Most of the time, I just find a soldier that was heavily armed and then play through the entire level as them, and so because of this, I'd use their rocket launchers or their sniper or whatever to try and just go through and no-scope everybody, and then after I've cleared the entire mission, I have to go back to my body as Stubbs and walk through the empty environments, and this to me feels a little bit flat. It makes it where these final chapters are just so much slower and drug out, and frankly, they're just not nearly as thrilling as the first half, and it makes it where, at times, this really seems like it wanted to be a third-person shooter, but they wouldn't commit. I mean, the fact that they won't just let Stubbs himself pick up a freaking gun and pull the trigger at times became frustrating, as I had to try and just continue to play hide and seek with shotguns. The only other issues I've really had with this game is more of the technical aspects, which is the fact that the biggest thing is that playing this on a PlayStation 5, the game crashed very frequently. During the 8 hours it took me to finish this game, I had this completely crash on me about 11 times, and in fact, at one point the game crashed during an autosave, which corrupted my save file. Now, thankfully, I was able to pull a previous save file out of the cloud and still beat it, but it's still kind of frustrating that this doesn't manage to actually work a little bit more smoothly. With how much this managed to really update the control schematics and make this feel very smooth, at times the technical issues, the glitches, the random times where people are falling through the floor and stuff, it feels like it needs a very, very substantial patch to try and make this feel a bit more updated. Now, the other half of this is that I wish they'd managed to do a bit more with the resolution or something to make this look more modern. Frankly, I play a lot of old school PlayStation 2 games. I've even done things like San Andreas or Grand Theft Auto, whatever, the old school games. This doesn't look like it's gotten that much of a touch up. This is just straight up the old school code, except now with some dramatic upscaling. And to me, I wish that they'd done just a little bit more to make it where this very unique art style had a chance to pop. These jokes are still good. The voice acting is still good. The sound effects are still so good. So the fact that I'm not able to actually appreciate all the visual tapestry that was originally put into this is a bit of a letdown. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Stubbs the Zombie a 7 out of 10. If you're really craving something that's purposefully old school, something that's going to bring back those fun memories of the time period where games were just so wacky and wild and random just for no reason, this is that. Stubbs the Zombie is very eccentric, it is very confusing, it is very bizarre, and it's just so good. And when I mean confusing, I mean that it's just so off the wall at times, stuff doesn't make sense, but it's so fun to go through and blow up some soldiers until you reach the very, very short conclusion. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.